I never imagined that the man who would steal my heart would do so with dirt beneath his fingernails and hay in his hair. But that is precisely how it happened, in the golden light of an autumn morning, when I had already resigned myself to a life without romance or illusion. My name is Eleanor Ashford, and I am the daughter of a baronet whose fortune crumbled like old parchment the year my father died. We kept the name, my mother and I, but little else. The estate was sold to cover debts I had not known existed, and we were left with a modest cottage on the edge of a village where no one knew our shame. My mother, ever proud, insisted we maintain appearances. She wore her finest gowns to church, and spoke of my father as though he had been a prince among men. I loved her for it, and I hated the lie of it in equal measure. To keep us fed and warm, I took work where I could find it. I had some skill with horses, a gift from my childhood when we still had stables and grooms and a world that made sense. So when I heard that the Duke of Greymore was seeking help at his country estate, I presented myself at the servants' entrance and asked for employment. The housekeeper, a stern woman with kind eyes, looked me over and said I could work in the stables if I did not mind the labor. I told her I did not mind anything that came with honest wages. That is how I came to spend my days mucking stalls and grooming horses for a duke I never saw. Greymore Hall was a vast and elegant prison of stone and ivy, and its master was a shadow, spoken of in whispers by the other servants. They said he was cold, that he had no patience for frivolity, that he had refused a dozen marriage proposals from the finest families in England. They said he trusted no one and believed that every woman who smiled at him wanted only his title and his fortune. They said he had grown bitter after watching his own mother manipulate his father for years before her death. I did not care about the Duke. I cared about the horses, who were warm and honest and never pretended to be something they were not. It was on my second week that I met him, or rather, I met the man I believed to be a fellow stable hand. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his brow and eyes the color of a winter sky. His shirt was rolled to his elbows, and his hands were strong and capable as he worked beside me, filling water troughs and checking the hooves of a mare who had gone lame. He did not speak much at first, only nodded when I greeted him, and went about his work with quiet efficiency. I thought him handsome in a rugged, unpolished way, though I told myself it did not matter. I was there to work, not to moon over a man whose life was likely as uncertain as my own. But he had a way of watching me when he thought I was not looking, and once, when I stumbled beneath the weight of a saddle, he caught my elbow and steadied me with a gentleness that made my breath catch. "Thank you," I said, flustered and foolish. He smiled then, a slow, cautious smile that changed his entire face. "You are stronger than you look," he said. His voice was low and warm, with an accent that spoke of education, though I could not place it. "I have to be," I replied, brushing straw from my skirt. "I cannot afford to be delicate." Something flickered in his eyes, a sadness or a recognition I could not name. "None of us can," he said quietly. After that, he began to speak to me more. He asked about my life, though I gave him only the vaguest answers. I did not want his pity, and I did not want him to know how far I had fallen. He seemed to understand, and he did not press. Instead, he told me about the horses, their temperaments and histories, and he listened when I shared my own observations. He had a gift for understanding animals, a patience that I admired deeply. One afternoon, as we worked side by side in the dim warmth of the stable, he asked me if I had always lived in the country. I hesitated, then said that I had grown up in a place much like this, though I did not say that it had been mine. The smell of the stables reminded me of home, of the days when my father would lift me onto his shoulders and walk me through the morning mist to see the foals. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Your old life." I thought of my father, of the library where he used to read to me, of the garden where my mother grew roses that bloomed in shades of cream and blush. "Every day," I said softly, "but missing it will not bring it back." He was quiet for a long moment, and when I glanced at him, I saw a pain in his face that mirrored my own. "No," he said at last. "It will not." We fell into an easy rhythm after that, a companionship born of shared labor and unspoken understanding. He made me laugh, which I had not done in months. He teased me gently when I was too serious, and he listened when I needed to speak. I began to look forward to the mornings, to the sight of him waiting by the gate with a bucket in hand, and that quiet smile on his lips. There was something profoundly peaceful about those hours we spent together, removed from the noise and cruelty of the world beyond the stable walls. I did not know his name. I called him by the nickname the other stable hands used, which was simply Ash, for the dark smudges that often marked his face after a day of work. He never corrected me, and I never thought to ask. It did not seem to matter. In that place, among the horses and the hay and the smell of leather and earth, we were simply two people trying to make sense of a world that had asked too much of us. He told me once, as we sat on bales of hay eating bread and cheese during our brief afternoon rest, that he envied the horses. "They do not have to pretend," he said. "They do not have to wear masks or say things they do not mean. They simply are." I looked at him with surprise. "You sound as though you have spent much time pretending," I said. His expression darkened and he looked away. "Have you not?" he asked. "Have you not worn a mask every day since your world changed?" I had no answer for that, because he was right. I wore a mask for my mother, pretending that I did not mind the work or the loss. I wore a mask for the other servants, pretending that I belonged among them. I even wore a mask for myself, pretending that I had accepted my fate. "Perhaps we all pretend," I said at last. "Perhaps that is the only way to survive." He turned to me then, and there was such intensity in his gaze that I felt my pulse quicken. "I do not want to pretend with you," he said quietly. "I want to be honest, even if it is only here, in this place." "Then be honest," I whispered. But he did not answer. He only reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering for a moment against my cheek. And in that silence, something shifted between us, something fragile and terrifying and impossibly beautiful. The days passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. We spoke of everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood, though he was careful to keep the details vague. He had grown up in a large house, he said, with parents who were more concerned with appearances than affection. He had learned early that people rarely said what they meant, and that trust was a luxury he could not afford. I told him about my father, about the way he had taught me to ride and to read Latin, about the illness that had taken him far too soon. I told him about my mother's grief, which had hardened into a brittle kind of pride that would not bend or break. I did not tell him about the shame I felt, or the fear that I would spend the rest of my life invisible and forgotten. But I think he understood anyway. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, he walked me to the edge of the estate. The air was cool and smelled of rain, and I wrapped my shawl tightly around my shoulders. He was quiet, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you ever wish you could start over?" he asked suddenly. "Leave everything behind and become someone new?" I thought about it, about the weight of my name and my past, about the constant struggle to keep my head above water. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I do not think we can ever truly leave ourselves behind. We carry our scars with us, whether we want to or not." He looked at me then, and there was something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "What if I told you that I have been carrying a scar for most of my life?" he said. "A lie that I cannot seem to escape." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" But he shook his head, as though regretting the words. "Never mind," he said. "Forget I said anything." I wanted to press him, to demand an explanation, but something in his expression stopped me. Instead, I reached out and took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "Whatever it is," I said softly, "you do not have to carry it alone." He stared at our joined hands for a long moment, and then he pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me in an embrace that felt like both a promise and a goodbye. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and I thought that perhaps this was enough. Perhaps this fleeting, fragile connection was all I would ever have, and perhaps that was more than I deserved. But I was wrong. I was so very wrong. It was late October when the housekeeper told me that the Duke was hosting a ball. The entire household was in a flurry of preparation, and even the stables were to be made spotless for the arrival of guests and their carriages. I worked late into the evening, scrubbing and polishing until my hands were raw and my back ached. Ash worked beside me, as he always did, his sleeves rolled up and his expression focused. "Will you attend the ball?" I asked him, half joking. Surely even stable hands are allowed a glimpse of the festivities. He looked at me with an expression I could not read. "Would you?" he asked. "If you could." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I have no place at a ball," I said. "I am no one." "You are not no one," he said sharply, and the intensity in his voice startled me. "You are Eleanor Ashford, and you are worth 100 of the people who will dance in that ballroom." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "How did you know my full name?" I asked. "I never told you." He froze, and for a moment, I saw something like fear in his eyes. Then he turned away, busying himself with a bridle. "I heard it from the other servants," he said too quickly. "They gossip." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the warmth between us was real, that the man I had come to care for was exactly who he seemed to be. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and I could not shake the feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The night of the ball arrived, and I watched from the shadows as carriages rolled up the drive and ladies in silk and jewels stepped into the light. I told myself I did not care, that their world was not mine and never would be. But when I saw Ash standing near the entrance to the hall, dressed not in his rough work clothes but in the fine evening attire of a gentleman, I felt the ground shift beneath me. He was speaking to the housekeeper, his posture straight and commanding, and she was curtsying to him. Curtsying. My breath caught in my throat, and I pressed myself against the cold stone wall, my mind racing. Who was he? What had I done? What fool had I been to let myself care for someone I did not truly know? I did not wait to find out. I turned and fled into the night, my heart breaking with every step, the sound of music and laughter echoing behind me like a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my narrow bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what I had seen. The image of Ash, dressed as a gentleman, receiving the deference of the household staff, played over and over in my mind like a terrible dream from which I could not wake. Who was he? The question tormented me. Was he the Duke himself? It seemed impossible. And yet the evidence was there. The education in his voice, the way he had known my full name, the sorrow in his eyes when he spoke of pretending and wearing masks. Had he been deceiving me all this time, playing at being a stable hand while I poured out my heart to him like a fool? The thought made me sick with shame and anger. If he was the Duke, then he had made a mockery of me. He had watched me struggle and toil, knowing all the while that he could have eased my burden with a single word. He had let me believe we were equals, that our connection was built on honesty and shared hardship, when in truth he had been observing me like some sort of experiment. Or perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps he was merely a gentleman visiting the estate, someone of rank but not the Duke himself. But even that possibility brought no comfort. He had still lied to me. He had still allowed me to care for him under false pretenses. I rose before dawn, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. and made my way to the stables. I told myself I would work as I always had, that I would not let this confusion affect my livelihood. But when I arrived, I found him waiting for me. He was dressed in his work clothes again, the fine evening attire gone, and he looked as though he had not slept either. "Eleanor," he said, stepping toward me, "please let me explain." I held up my hand, stopping him. "Do not," I said, my voice cold. "Do not insult me with explanations. Just tell me who you are." He hesitated, and I saw the struggle in his face. "My name is Alexander Hartley," he said quietly. "I am the Duke of Greymore." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt as though the ground had opened beneath my feet. I had suspected it, but hearing the truth spoken aloud was still a blow. I took a step back, wrapping my arms around myself as though I could hold the pieces of my shattered heart together. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you lie to me?" "I did not lie," he said, and there was desperation in his tone. "I never claimed to be anyone other than who I am. I simply did not correct your assumptions." "That is the same as lying," I said, and the anger in my voice surprised even me. "You let me believe you were a stable hand. You let me confide in you, trust you, care for you, all while knowing that you were deceiving me." "I was not deceiving you," he said, stepping closer. "I was trying to find something real. Do you have any idea what it is like to live the way I do, never knowing if people see you or only your title? Every woman who smiles at me wants to be a duchess. Every man who befriends me wants a favor. I am surrounded by people, and I am utterly alone." I stared at him, my heart torn between sympathy and fury. "So you decided to play at being common," I said bitterly. "You decided to see what it was like to work with your hands and pretend you had no power, and you used me to do it." "No," he said fiercely, "I did not use you. I came to the stables because I wanted to escape the suffocation of my life. I wanted to be someone other than the Duke of Greymore, even if only for a few hours each day. And then I met you, and everything changed. You were not like anyone I had ever known. You were honest and strong and kind, and you saw me, Eleanor. Not my title, not my wealth, but me." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "If that is true," I said, "then why did you not tell me? Why did you let me find out like this?" He ran a hand through his hair, his expression anguished. "Because I was afraid," he said. "I was afraid that if you knew who I was, you would see me differently. You would stop being yourself. You would start playing a role, the way everyone else does." I wanted to hold on to what we had for just a little longer. "And what did we have?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Was any of it real? Or was it all just a game to you?" He reached for me, but I stepped back, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. "It was real," he said. "Every moment we spent together was real. My feelings for you are real. I have never felt this way about anyone, Eleanor. You have to believe me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to fall into his arms and forgive him and pretend that nothing had changed, but I could not. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too deep." "You should have trusted me," I said quietly. "You should have been honest with me from the beginning." "I know," he said, and his voice was raw with regret. "I know, and I am sorry. But please, Eleanor, do not let this destroy what we have. Give me a chance to make this right." I looked at him, at the man I had thought I knew, and I felt a terrible ache in my chest. "I do not know if I can," I said. "I do not know if I can trust you again." Before he could respond, the head groom appeared, calling for the Duke. There was urgency in his voice, something about the guests and the preparations for the hunt. Alexander glanced at me, his expression pleading, but I turned away. I could not look at him any longer. He left, and I was alone in the stables with the horses and the smell of hay and the remnants of a dream that had turned to ash. The days that followed were a special kind of torment. Alexander tried to speak with me several times, but I avoided him. I threw myself into my work, rising earlier and staying later, doing anything to keep my mind occupied. The other servants noticed the change in me, but they said nothing. They had their own troubles, their own secrets. My mother, when I visited her on my day off, sensed that something was wrong. "You look pale," she said, her sharp eyes studying my face. "Are they working you too hard at that place?" "I am fine," I lied. "It is just the change in weather." She did not believe me, but she did not press. Instead, she poured me tea and spoke of the village gossip, of the families who had attended the Duke's ball, and the rumors that were already spreading. "They say the Duke danced with no one," she said. "He stood in the corner all evening looking miserable, and then he disappeared entirely. The young ladies are quite put out." I said nothing, stirring my tea and staring into the fire. I did not want to think about the ball, or about Alexander, or about the mess I had made of everything. But fate, it seemed, was not finished with me. A week after the ball, the housekeeper summoned me to her office. I went reluctantly, wondering if I was to be dismissed. Perhaps Alexander had decided that my presence was too uncomfortable, that it would be easier to send me away. But when I entered the office, the housekeeper's expression was not unkind. "The Duke has requested that you join the household staff in preparing for a dinner party next week," she said. "He specifically asked for you." I frowned. Why would he ask for me? I work in the stables, not in the house. She shrugged. "I do not question his requests, Miss Ashford. I simply relay them. You are to report to the main house tomorrow morning. I wanted to refuse, but I could not afford to lose this position." So I nodded and left, my stomach churning with dread. The next morning, I presented myself at the servants' entrance of the main house. I had never been inside before, and I was struck by the grandeur of it. The ceilings were high and painted with murals of clouds and angels. The floors were polished marble, and the walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. It was beautiful and cold, a monument to wealth and power. I was put to work polishing silver and arranging flowers, tasks that were far removed from my usual labor. The other servants were polite but distant, clearly aware that I was not one of them. I kept my head down and did as I was told, trying not to think about the fact that Alexander was somewhere in this vast house, perhaps watching me. It was late afternoon when I finally saw him. I was carrying a vase of roses down a long corridor when a door opened and he stepped out. We both froze, staring at each other across the expanse of polished floor. "Eleanor," he said, and my name on his lips was both a balm and a wound. "Your Grace," I said, my voice flat. I curtsied, the gesture feeling awkward and wrong. He flinched as though I had struck him. "Please," he said, "do not do that. Do not treat me like a stranger." "What else am I to do?" I asked. "You are the Duke of Greymore, and I am a servant in your household. That is the truth of it, is it not?" He closed the distance between us, his expression fierce. "That is not the truth," he said. "The truth is that I am a man who has fallen in love with a woman who sees him as he truly is. The truth is that I would give up this title, this house, everything I have, if it meant I could go back to the way things were between us." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "You do not mean that," I said. "I do," he said. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." For a moment, I was tempted to believe him. For a moment, I wanted to throw caution to the wind and let myself love him the way he claimed to love me. But then I thought of the ball, of the humiliation I would face if anyone discovered that the Duke of Greymore had been courting a stable hand. I thought of my mother and the shame it would bring to what little remained of our name. "It does not matter what you feel," I said quietly. "It does not matter what I feel. We come from different worlds, Alexander. You are a duke, and I am no one. There is no future for us. Then we will make one, he said. I do not care what society thinks. I do not care about propriety or scandal. I care about you. I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. You say that now, but you will change your mind. You will realize that I am not worth the cost, and you will resent me for it. He reached out and took my hand, his grip firm and warm. I will never change my mind, he said, and you are worth everything. I pulled my hand away, the gesture breaking both our hearts. I cannot do this, I whispered. I cannot be with you, not like this. Then how? He asked desperately. Tell me what you need, Eleanor. Tell me how to make this right. But I had no answer. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in that cold, beautiful corridor, and I did not look back. The dinner party arrived like a storm I could not escape. I had hoped to remain in the stables, away from the glittering spectacle of the Duke's social obligations, but the housekeeper had other plans. I was to serve at table, she informed me, because 2 of the regular maids had fallen ill. I protested, saying I had no experience with such work, but she waved away my concerns. You are clever enough to learn, she said, and we are short on hands. So I found myself dressed in a borrowed uniform that was slightly too large, my hair pinned back severely, my hands trembling as I carried trays of food and wine into the dining room. The guests were everything I had expected. Ladies in silk gowns with jewels at their throats, gentlemen in perfectly tailored coats discussing politics and hunting. They did not look at me, not really. I was part of the furniture, invisible in my servitude. But Alexander looked at me. I felt his gaze follow me as I moved around the table, and every time our eyes met, I saw the same longing and frustration that I felt. He was seated at the head of the table, playing the role of the gracious host, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. Beside him sat Lady Penelope Fairfax, a woman of breathtaking beauty and impeccable lineage. She was all pale skin and golden hair, with a laugh that sounded like music and a way of touching Alexander's arm that made my stomach twist with jealousy. The other guests clearly expected an announcement, a betrothal between the Duke and the lady. They spoke of it openly, making jests about wedding dates and future heirs. I hated her. I hated the ease with which she belonged in this world, the confidence with which she claimed Alexander's attention. And I hated myself for caring, for feeling anything at all when I had no right to him. It was as I was refilling Lady Penelope's wine glass that disaster struck. My hand, slick with nervous sweat, slipped, and the glass tipped, spilling red wine across her pale blue gown. She gasped and leapt to her feet, and the entire table fell silent. "You clumsy fool," she cried, her beautiful face twisted with fury. "Look what you have done." I stood frozen, the empty carafe still in my hand, my face burning with humiliation. "I am so sorry, my lady," I stammered. "Please let me help. You have done enough," she snapped. She turned to Alexander, her eyes flashing. "Your Grace, I insist that this girl be dismissed at once. She is clearly incompetent." I felt the weight of every gaze in the room, the judgment and disdain of people who would never see me as anything more than a servant who had failed in her duty. I waited for Alexander to agree, to do what any duke would do and send me away to preserve the dignity of his guest. But instead, he rose from his seat, his expression cold and controlled. "Lady Penelope," he said quietly, "accidents happen. There is no need for such dramatics." She blinked at him, clearly taken aback. "But Alexander," she began. "Miss Ashford will not be dismissed," he said firmly. "She has done nothing that warrants such a punishment. Now, if you will excuse me, I will have a maid attend to your gown." He looked at me then, and there was something in his eyes that made my breath catch. "You may go," he said gently. "Thank you for your service this evening." I curtsied and fled the room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I did not stop until I reached the kitchens, where I collapsed onto a stool and pressed my hands to my face, fighting back tears. The cook, a kind woman named Mrs. Brennan, came over and patted my shoulder. "Do not let them upset you, dear," she said. "These fine folk are all the same. They think the world revolves around them." But it was not Lady Penelope's cruelty that had undone me. It was Alexander's defense of me, the way he had refused to let her humiliate me further. It was the realization that he had meant what he said, that he truly did not care what society thought. And that terrified me more than anything. I did not see Alexander again for several days. I returned to the stables, to the familiar routine of mucking stalls and grooming horses, and I tried to forget the way he had looked at me across that dining table. But I could not forget, and the longing I felt was a constant ache in my chest. It was on a gray afternoon, with rain drumming against the roof of the stable, that he came to me. I was brushing down a mare, humming softly to calm her, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting one of the grooms, and found Alexander standing there, his coat damp from the rain, his expression somber. "We need to talk," he said. I set down the brush, my heart racing. "I do not think there is anything left to say," I replied. He stepped closer, and I could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the weariness in his face. "There is everything to say," he told me. "Eleanor, I cannot go on like this. I cannot pretend that I do not love you. I cannot marry Lady Penelope or anyone else when my heart belongs to you." I shook my head, desperation rising in my throat. "You do not understand," I said. "If you refuse to marry someone of your station, if you pursue this madness with me, you will be destroyed. Society will turn on you. They will say you have lost your mind, that you have been bewitched by a common woman, and I will be blamed for it all. I will be called a seductress, a social climber, a woman who trapped a duke for her own gain. Let them say what they will," he said fiercely. "I do not care." "But I do," I cried. "I care because I have already lost everything once, and I cannot bear to lose what little I have left. I care because my mother would be shamed beyond repair. I care because I do not want to be the reason you are cast out from the only world you have ever known." "Then what do you want?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Tell me what you want, Eleanor, because I am lost without you." I looked at him, this man who had somehow become everything to me, and I felt my resolve crumble. "I want you," I whispered. "I want you more than I have ever wanted anything. But I am afraid. I am so afraid that this will end in ruin for both of us." He closed the distance between us and took my face in his hands, his touch gentle and sure. "Then we will face that ruin together," he said. "I would rather be cast out with you by my side than live a life of empty privilege without you." And then he kissed me, and all my fears and doubts dissolved in the warmth of his embrace. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and desperation and hope, a promise that we would find a way to be together, no matter the cost. But the cost, I would soon learn, was higher than either of us could have imagined. It was 2 days later that I received a summons to the main house. The housekeeper's expression was grave as she handed me the note. "The Duke wishes to see you in his study," she said. Immediately, I went with a sense of foreboding, my mind racing with possibilities. Had someone seen us in the stables? Had word of our indiscretion reached the other servants? When I entered the study, I found Alexander standing by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He turned when he heard me, and the look on his face made my blood run cold. "What is it?" I asked. "What has happened?" He gestured to a chair, and I sat, my legs suddenly weak. "Eleanor," he said carefully, "I have received word from London. There are rumors circulating about us. Someone saw us together, and they have been spreading tales." I felt the room tilt around me. "What kind of tales?" I asked. "The kind that could destroy your reputation," he said quietly. "They are saying that you are my mistress, that I have installed you in the stables to keep you close. They are saying that I have dishonored you and that I am playing at being common while treating you as my plaything. I pressed a hand to my mouth, nausea rising in my throat. This is exactly what I feared, I said. This is why I told you we could not be together. I know, he said, and there was anguish in his voice. I know, and I am sorry. But Eleanor, I will not let these rumors stand. I will not let them paint you as something you are not. What can you do? I asked bitterly. You cannot stop people from talking. You cannot force society to accept us. No, he said. But I can marry you. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. What did you say? I whispered. He knelt before me, taking my hands in his. I can marry you, he repeated. I can make you my duchess and give you the protection of my name. I can ensure that no one dares to speak ill of you again. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. Alexander, you cannot, I said. You will be ruined. Your family, your title, everything you have worked for. I do not care, he said fiercely. I do not care about any of it if it means losing you. Marry me, Eleanor. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are worth more than any title or fortune. I wanted to say yes. Every part of me longed to throw myself into his arms and accept his proposal. But I thought of my mother, of the shame it would bring her. I thought of the whispers and the scandal, of the way we would be forever marked as the duke who married beneath him and the woman who ensnared him. I need time, I said finally. Please, Alexander, give me time to think. He nodded, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Take all the time you need, he said, but know that my heart is yours, now and always. I left the study and walked through the gardens in a daze, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of wet earth and roses. I sat on a stone bench beneath an ancient oak tree and tried to imagine a future where I was the Duchess of Greymore, where I stood beside Alexander at balls and dinners, where I faced down the judgment of society with my head held high. And I realized, in that quiet moment, that I was not afraid of society's judgment. I was afraid of my own unworthiness, of the belief that I did not deserve the love of a man like Alexander. I was afraid that if I accepted his proposal, I would spend the rest of my life waiting for him to realize his mistake. But as I sat there beneath the oak tree, watching the clouds part to reveal a pale sliver of sun, I understood something else. Love was not about deserving. It was about choosing, and Alexander had chosen me, again and again, despite every obstacle and every reason to walk away. Now it was my turn to choose, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would choose him. I would choose love, even if it meant facing the scorn of the world. I would choose the man who had seen me, truly seen me, and loved me anyway. I stood and walked back toward the house, my heart light for the first time in weeks. I would find Alexander, and I would tell him yes. I would become his wife, and together we would weather whatever storms lay ahead. But when I reached the front entrance, I found a crowd gathered, their faces pale with shock. The housekeeper saw me and hurried over, her expression stricken. "Miss Ashford," she said, "there has been terrible news. Lady Penelope has made an accusation against you. She claims you have been spreading lies about the Duke, that you have been trying to sabotage her engagement to him. She is demanding that you be brought before a magistrate." The accusation struck me like a physical blow. I stood in the entrance hall, surrounded by whispering servants and shocked faces, and I felt the world narrow to a single, terrible point. Lady Penelope had accused me of slander, of deliberately spreading lies to destroy her chances with Alexander. It was absurd, a fabrication born of jealousy and wounded pride, but I knew that the truth mattered little in the face of such a public claim. The housekeeper gripped my arm, her face pale. "You must come with me," she said urgently. "The Duke will want to speak with you before anyone else arrives." I followed her through the corridors in a daze, my mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. How had things spiraled so quickly out of control? Only moments ago, I had been sitting beneath the oak tree, deciding to accept Alexander's proposal. Now I faced the possibility of public disgrace, perhaps even legal consequences. Alexander was waiting in his study, pacing like a caged animal. When he saw me, relief and fury warred across his features. "Eleanor," he said, crossing to me in 3 long strides. "Are you all right? Have they hurt you?" I shook my head, unable to speak. The housekeeper quietly withdrew, leaving us alone. "This is madness," Alexander continued, his voice tight with anger. "Penelope has lost her senses. She is claiming you spread rumors that I was secretly engaged to her, that you told servants and villagers alike that she had trapped me into a promise of marriage. It is completely false, and I will make sure everyone knows it." I sank into a chair, my legs no longer able to support me. "Why would she do this?" I asked. "What does she hope to gain?" He ran a hand through his hair, his expression dark. "Revenge," he said bitterly. "She knows that I have refused her, that I will never marry her. She saw us together, Eleanor. At the dinner party, she noticed the way I looked at you, the way I defended you, and she has decided that if she cannot have me, she will destroy the woman who has taken her place in my heart." "But I have done nothing," I protested. "I have never spoken a word against her. I have barely thought of her except to envy her position." "I know," he said, kneeling before me and taking my hands. "I know you are innocent, and I will prove it. I will stand before the magistrate myself and testify to your character. I will make it clear that Penelope's accusations are nothing more than the vindictive lies of a woman scorned." "No," I said sharply, pulling my hands away. "You cannot do that. If you defend me publicly, you will only confirm the rumors that we are involved. You will tie yourself to this scandal, and it will destroy you." "I do not care," he said fiercely. "Do you not understand, Eleanor? I would burn this entire estate to the ground if it meant protecting you. I would give up my title, my fortune, everything, if it kept you safe." "And what of me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What of the life I would have after you have sacrificed everything for my sake? Do you think I could bear the weight of knowing that I had cost you so much? Do you think I could live with myself, knowing that your family, your legacy, your very identity had been destroyed because of me?" He reached for me again, but I stood, putting distance between us. "I cannot let you do this," I said. "I will face the magistrate alone. I will defend myself, and if I am found guilty of something I did not do, then so be it. But I will not drag you down with me." His face paled, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "You cannot mean that," he said. "Eleanor, please, do not do this. Do not push me away when I am trying to help you." "I am not pushing you away," I said softly. "I am trying to save you from making a terrible mistake. You say you love me, Alexander, and I believe you. But love is not always enough. Sometimes love means letting go." Before he could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. A footman entered, his expression apologetic. "Your Grace," he said, "Lady Penelope and her father, the Earl of Fairfax, have arrived. They are demanding an immediate audience with you." Alexander's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Show them to the drawing room," he said. "I will be there momentarily." The footman left, and Alexander turned back to me. "Stay here," he said. "Do not leave this room until I return. I will handle this." I wanted to argue, but I could see the determination in his face. So I nodded, and he left, closing the door behind him. I stood alone in the study, surrounded by leather-bound books and dark wood paneling, and I felt more trapped than I had ever felt in my life. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. I could not tell. I paced the room, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. What was happening in the drawing room? Was Alexander defending me? Or was he being forced to choose between his honor and his position? Was Lady Penelope weaving more lies, painting me as a manipulative schemer who had seduced a duke for my own gain? Finally, the door opened, and Alexander returned. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "It is done," he said quietly. "What is done?" I asked, my heart pounding. He crossed to the desk and poured himself a glass of brandy, drinking it in one swift motion. "I have made an agreement with the Earl of Fairfax," he said. "Lady Penelope will withdraw her accusations against you, and in return I have agreed to publicly announce that there was never any understanding between us, that she was never under the impression that I intended to marry her." Relief flooded through me. "Then I am free," I said. "The accusations are dropped." He nodded, but there was no triumph in his expression. "You are free," he confirmed, "but there is a condition." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What condition?" I asked. He turned to face me, and I saw the pain in his eyes. "You must leave Greymore Hall," he said. "You must leave this estate and never return. The Earl insisted upon it. He said that your presence here is a constant reminder of the humiliation his daughter suffered, and that as long as you remain, the rumors will continue." I stared at him, struggling to process his words. "You agreed to this," I said slowly. "You agreed to send me away." "I had no choice," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "If I had refused, the Earl would have pursued the accusations. He would have dragged you before the magistrate and used every ounce of his influence to see you punished. I could not let that happen, Eleanor. I could not risk your safety. So instead you are casting me out," I said, and I heard the bitterness in my own voice. "You are sending me away, just as everyone always does." "That is not what I am doing," he protested. "I am protecting you." "No," I said, anger rising in my chest. "You are choosing the path of least resistance. You are choosing to placate a vengeful woman and her father, rather than standing up for what is right. You say you love me, Alexander, but love means fighting for someone, not sending them away the moment things become difficult." His face flushed with anger and hurt. "How dare you?" he said. "How dare you question my love for you when I have done everything in my power to keep you safe? Do you have any idea what it cost me to make that agreement? Do you have any idea how it felt to promise that I would let you go?" "Then why did you do it?" I cried. "Why did you not fight for me? Why did you not stand before the Earl and tell him that I am innocent? That you will not be bullied into sacrificing me for the sake of his daughter's pride?" "Because I am a coward," he shouted, and the words hung in the air between us like a confession. "Because when it came down to it, I chose the easy path. I chose to protect my position, my reputation, my place in society. And I told myself it was for your sake, that I was doing it to save you. But the truth is, I was saving myself." I stared at him, tears streaming down my face. "At least you are honest," I said quietly. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I am sorry," he said, his voice muffled. "I am so sorry, Eleanor. I have failed you in every way that matters." I crossed to him and knelt beside the chair, taking his hands in mine. "You have not failed me," I said gently. "You have shown me who you are, and I am grateful for it. You are a good man, Alexander, but you are not strong enough to defy the world for me, and I cannot blame you for that." He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "What will you do?" he asked. "Where will you go?" "I will return to my mother," I said. "I will tell her that the position did not work out, and I will find other employment elsewhere. I will rebuild my life, as I have done before. And I will try to forget you, though I do not think I ever truly will." He pulled me close, holding me as though he could keep me there through sheer force of will. "I love you," he whispered against my hair. "I will always love you." "And I love you," I replied. "But sometimes love is not enough." We stayed like that for a long moment. two people holding on to something that was already slipping away. And then I pulled back, wiping my tears, and I stood. "I will leave in the morning," I said. "I will collect my wages from the housekeeper and be gone before dawn." He nodded, unable to speak. I walked to the door, my heart breaking with every step. But before I left, I turned back one last time. "Goodbye, Alexander," I said. "I hope you find the strength you need, even if it is too late for us." And then I walked out of his study, out of his life, and I did not look back. That night, I packed my few belongings into a worn traveling bag. I said goodbye to the horses, running my hands along their soft muzzles and whispering promises that I would remember them. I thanked Mrs. Brennan for her kindness, and I left a note for the housekeeper, expressing my gratitude for the opportunity to work at Graymore Hall. And then, in the gray light of dawn, I walked down the long drive for the last time. The air was cold and smelled of rain, and the estate loomed behind me like a beautiful, terrible dream. I did not cry. I had no tears left. I simply walked, one foot in front of the other, toward an uncertain future. But as I reached the gates, I heard the sound of hoofbeats behind me. I turned, my heart leaping with hope, and saw Alexander riding toward me on his black stallion. He reined in beside me, his face desperate. "Do not go," he said. "Please, Eleanor, do not go." "I have to," I said. "You know I have to." He dismounted and took my hands, his grip almost painful. "I was wrong," he said. "I was wrong to let you go. I was wrong to choose the easy path. I should have fought for you, and I am fighting now. Come back with me. Marry me. To hell with society. To hell with the Earl and his daughter. I choose you, Eleanor. I will always choose you." I looked at him, this man I loved with every fiber of my being, and I felt something shift inside me. He had come after me. He had realized his mistake, and he was willing to risk everything to make it right. And in that moment, I knew that he was strong enough after all. He was strong enough to love me, to fight for me, to defy the world for me. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed me then, there on the side of the road as the sun broke through the clouds, and it felt like a beginning, rather than an ending. When we finally pulled apart, he took my hand and led me back toward the estate, back toward a future I had never dared to imagine. But the path to that future was not smooth. The moment we returned to Graymore Hall, Alexander summoned the household staff and made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the entire estate. He declared that he was going to marry me, Eleanor Ashford, and that anyone who had a problem with his decision was free to seek employment elsewhere. The servants stood in stunned silence, and I saw judgment and confusion in many of their faces. But I also saw acceptance in others, particularly in Mrs. Brennan, who smiled at me with tears in her eyes. The news spread through the county like wildfire. Within days, we began receiving letters, some congratulatory, but most filled with shock and disapproval. Alexander's distant relatives wrote to express their dismay. Old friends severed ties. Invitations that had once been plentiful dried up entirely. And Lady Penelope, true to form, spread vicious rumors that I had bewitched the Duke, that I was nothing more than a fortune hunter who had manipulated a lonely man into making a catastrophic mistake. But Alexander stood firm. He responded to each letter with courtesy but unwavering resolve. He made it clear that his decision was final, that I was to be his duchess, and that anyone who wished to remain in his good graces would treat me with the respect I deserved. My mother's reaction was perhaps the most difficult to bear. When I went to tell her the news, I found her in her small sitting room, mending one of her old gowns. She looked up as I entered, and I saw the hope in her eyes, the desperate wish that I had come with good news about steady employment or perhaps a small inheritance. "Mother," I said, sitting beside her and taking her hands, "I have something to tell you, and I need you to listen with an open heart." She frowned, concern creasing her brow. "What is it, Eleanor?" You look so serious. I am going to be married, I said, to the Duke of Greymore. For a moment, she simply stared at me, and then she laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Do not joke about such things, she said. It is cruel. I am not joking, I replied. Alexander has asked me to marry him, and I have said yes. The color drained from her face. You cannot mean this, she whispered. Eleanor, tell me you have not done something so foolish. Tell me you have not agreed to marry a duke who will only bring scandal and ruin upon us. I felt tears prick my eyes. Mother, he loves me, I said. And I love him. Is that not enough? Love, she said bitterly. Love is a luxury we cannot afford. You are the daughter of a ruined baronet, Eleanor. You have no dowry, no connections, no place in society. If you marry this duke, you will be laughed at, scorned, and pitied. You will spend the rest of your life as an outsider in a world that will never accept you. And when he tires of you, as men always do, you will have nothing. He will not tire of me, I said, though her words cut deep. And even if the world never accepts me, I would rather live one day as his wife than a lifetime without him. She turned away from me, her shoulders shaking. Then you are a fool, she said quietly. Just like your father was a fool, believing that love and honor were more important than security and prudence. And look where it got him. Look where it got us. I reached for her, but she pulled away. I am doing this, Mother, I said firmly. With or without your blessing, I am going to marry Alexander, but I would very much like to have your support. She was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the gray sky. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I cannot give you my blessing, she said, but I will not stand in your way. You are a grown woman, Eleanor, and you must make your own choices, even if they lead to heartbreak. It was not the response I had hoped for, but it was something. I kissed her cheek and left, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Alexander insisted on a proper wedding, despite my protests that a simple ceremony would suffice. He wanted the world to see that he was proud to marry me, that I was not some secret shame to be hidden away. So we planned a wedding at the estate chapel, with a small gathering of those who had remained loyal, and a few curious neighbors who wanted to witness the spectacle. I was fitted for a wedding gown, a beautiful creation of ivory silk and delicate lace that made me feel like a princess from a fairy tale. Alexander spared no expense, commissioning jewels and flowers and a wedding breakfast that would rival any grand society event. It was overwhelming and extravagant, and utterly unlike anything I had ever imagined for myself. But the most difficult moment came 3 days before the wedding, when a carriage arrived at Greymore Hall bearing an unexpected guest. I was in the garden, supervising the placement of flower arrangements, when the housekeeper hurried to find me. Miss Ashford, she said breathlessly, Lady Penelope is here. She is demanding to speak with you. My blood ran cold. What does she want? I asked. I do not know, the housekeeper replied, but she is insistent. She says she will not leave until you agree to see her. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Very well, I said. Show her to the drawing room. I will be there shortly. When I entered the drawing room, I found Lady Penelope standing by the window, her back to me. She was dressed in a gown of deep burgundy, her golden hair arranged in perfect curls. She turned as I entered, and I was struck by how tired she looked, how much older than her years. Lady Penelope, I said carefully, what can I do for you? She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You can tell me how you did it, she said. How you stole a duke from under my nose. How you, a mere servant, managed to win the heart of a man who was supposed to be mine. I did not steal anything, I replied quietly. Alexander made his own choice. I did not manipulate or deceive him. I simply allowed him to see me as I truly am, and he chose to love me for it. She crossed to me, her eyes blazing with fury. "You have ruined everything," she hissed. "I was supposed to be the Duchess of Greymore. I was supposed to have the title, the estate, the respect. And you, with your false modesty and your pathetic poverty, you have taken it all from me." I felt pity for her then, despite everything she had done. "You never loved him," I said gently. "You loved what he represented. You loved the idea of being a duchess, of having power and position. But you never saw Alexander as a man, as a person with feelings and dreams and fears. You only saw a title." Her hand shot out, and she slapped me across the face. The force of it sent me stumbling backward, my cheek burning. "How dare you?" she spat. "How dare you presume to judge me?" I pressed a hand to my stinging cheek, but I did not look away. "I am not judging you," I said. "I am simply telling you the truth. And the truth is that you could have had Alexander's affection if you had ever bothered to see him as more than a prize to be won. But you did not, and now it is too late." She stared at me, her chest heaving, and then suddenly all the fight seemed to drain out of her. She sank into a chair, her face crumpling. "You are right," she whispered. "I never loved him. I only wanted what he could give me. And now I have nothing. I could have gloated. I could have turned away and left her to her misery. But instead, I sat beside her and took her hand. "You do not have nothing," I said. "You have your beauty, your intelligence, your family. You have a future ahead of you, Lady Penelope, and it does not have to include a loveless marriage to a man who does not want you. You can find someone who will love you truly, if you let yourself be vulnerable enough to be loved." She looked at me with something like wonder. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. "After everything I have done to you." "Because I understand what it is like to feel powerless," I said. "And because holding on to anger and resentment only poisons the soul. I do not want that for you, and I do not want it for myself." She squeezed my hand, and then she stood. "I am sorry," she said, "for the accusations, for the cruelty, for all of it. I hope you and the Duke will be happy together." I stood as well. "Thank you," I said, "and I hope you find happiness too." She left without another word, and I stood alone in the drawing room, my cheek still aching but my heart strangely light. I had forgiven her, and in doing so I had freed myself from the bitterness that had been eating away at me. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright. I stood in my chamber, dressed in my ivory gown, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. My mother had come, though she said little and kept herself apart from the other guests. But she was there, and that was enough. Alexander waited for me at the altar, dressed in his finest coat, his eyes shining with love and pride. As I walked down the aisle, I felt the weight of every gaze upon me, the judgment and the curiosity. But I kept my eyes on Alexander, on the man who had chosen me above all others, and I felt no fear. We spoke our vows in voices that trembled with emotion, and when he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the world shift around me. I was no longer Eleanor Ashford, the daughter of a ruined baronet. I was Eleanor Hartley, the Duchess of Greymore, and I had claimed my place in a world that had tried to deny me. The wedding breakfast was a joyous affair, filled with laughter and music and toasts to our future. Alexander never left my side, his hand always finding mine, his smile never fading. And as I looked around at the faces of those who had come to celebrate with us, I realized that we had built something new. We had created a life that was ours alone, free from the constraints and expectations of society. That night, as we stood together on the terrace overlooking the estate, Alexander pulled me close and kissed my forehead. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I am," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I am happier than I ever thought possible." He smiled, And in that smile, I saw our future stretching out before us, filled with challenges and triumphs, with love and laughter, and the quiet certainty that we had found in each other what we had been searching for all along. We had found home, and as the stars appeared overhead and the night wrapped around us like a cloak, I knew that whatever trials lay ahead, we would face them together. We would build a life of honesty and courage, a life where love was not a weakness, but the greatest strength of all. I had been a servant, a woman with nothing to offer but my heart. And Alexander had been a duke, a man trapped by duty and expectation. But together, we had become something more. We had become partners, equals, two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of places and refused to let go. And that, I thought as I rested my head against his shoulder, was the greatest victory of all.